If I had deleted that recording 5 seconds earlier, I'd probably still be alive today. I know how ridiculous that sounds. I spent nearly a decade installing surveillance systems across Seattle, and if there was one thing I believed without question, it was that cameras never lied. People forgot details. Witnesses contradicted themselves. Fear twisted memories into impossible stories. A camera, however, simply captured reality. It didn't imagine monsters, ghosts, or shadows that weren't there. At least, that's what I believed until one security camera recorded something no human being could see. I watched the footage more than 100 times, hoping I had overlooked a reflection, a compression error, or some technical glitch that could explain what happened. Every replay ended the same way. The hallway remained empty. My own eyes saw nothing standing outside my apartment. Yet the recording insisted someone was there, waiting with impossible patience just beyond the limits of human sight. The worst part wasn't what appeared. It was what happened after midnight. The final 5 seconds of that recording still wake me from sleep. I can hear the slow knocking. I can see my apartment door opening. And I can see myself stepping into the hallway. Even though I remember never opening that door. The police called the footage corrupted. The manufacturer blamed faulty software. Neither explanation came close to the truth, because what that camera captured wasn't a glitch. It was a warning, and before this story ends, you'll understand exactly what appeared on that recording at midnight. But to understand what the camera recorded, you need to know why I installed it in the first place. My name is Daniel Carter, and at the time all of this happened, I was 34 years old, living alone in a quiet apartment building on the north side of Seattle. I worked as a surveillance technician for a local security company, spending my days installing cameras in office buildings, retail stores, parking garages, and apartment complexes. Most people only noticed security cameras after something went wrong. For me, they were simply another piece of technology, unemotional, objective, and incapable of making mistakes. I trusted recorded footage more than eyewitness accounts because cameras couldn't panic, exaggerate, or lie. My building wasn't anything special. It was a 4-story brick complex built sometime in the late 80s, with narrow hallways, aging elevators, and neighbors who mostly kept to themselves. It was the kind of place where everyone politely nodded to each other without ever learning each other's last names. The loudest noise most nights came from the old heating system rattling through the walls or the rain tapping against the windows during another typical Seattle evening. It felt safe, predictable, and comfortably ordinary. The last place anyone would associate with ghost stories or unexplained events. The building was managed by Mike Harrison, a friendly man in his late 50s who had owned the property for nearly 2 decades. Mike wasn't the kind of landlord who ignored maintenance requests or avoided tenants. If a pipe leaked, he fixed it. If the elevator stopped working, he stayed until the repair crew arrived. He believed every problem had a practical explanation, and over the years we'd become friendly enough to exchange coffee and conversation whenever I passed the management office. That's why I was surprised when Mike knocked on my door one Thursday afternoon looking genuinely concerned. "You've worked with security systems for years," he said. "Can I ask you something without you thinking I've lost my mind?" I laughed and invited him inside. He hesitated before speaking again. "For the past 3 weeks, tenants on the 3rd floor have been filing the same complaint." "What kind of complaint?" "They keep hearing someone knock on their apartment doors just after midnight." I shrugged. "Teenagers." Mike slowly shook his head. "Maybe, except every single person says the same thing. They hear 3 slow knocks. They open the door immediately, and nobody's ever there." At first, I assumed someone was playing an elaborate prank. Apartment buildings attracted bored people with too much free time, and security cameras usually ended those games pretty quickly. The more Mike described the incidents, however, the stranger they became. Different tenants, different apartments, same exact time, same 3 knocks, always an empty hallway waiting outside. When Mike finally asked if I could install a brand new security camera overlooking the entire third floor, I agreed without hesitation. Convinced the footage would expose whoever was responsible, I gathered my equipment, certain I'd catch the mysterious midnight prankster before the week was over. Installing the camera took less than an hour. I mounted it above the elevator on the third floor, giving it a clear view of every apartment door, the stairwell entrance, and the long stretch of hallway connecting them. It was one of the newest models my company carried, capable of recording in crystal-clear 4K resolution with infrared night vision, intelligent motion detection, and cloud backup. If someone so much as walked past a doorway, the system would detect them instantly. Before leaving, I tested every feature twice, checked the live feed on my laptop, and even walked the hallway myself to make sure there were no blind spots. Everything worked exactly as it should. The first night was uneventful. The second night wasn't. At exactly 12:03 a.m., my phone vibrated with a motion alert from the newly installed camera. I opened the live feed while lying in bed, expecting to see a late-night tenant returning home. The hallway was empty. No footsteps, no movement, no one. The recording lasted exactly 12 seconds. The first 11 showed an empty apartment. The 12th ended on a single frozen frame. Standing behind me, just inches from my shoulder, was a pale face I had never seen before. It wasn't blurred. It wasn't distorted. It was staring directly into the camera. I immediately copied the final frame onto my laptop. If that face held the answers, there was only one thing left to do. I opened my editing software and began enhancing the image. I enlarged the final frame until the image filled my monitor. At first, the face behind me looked almost human. Pale skin, hollow eyes, a motionless expression that somehow felt familiar. But the more I sharpened the image, the less human it became. The facial features dissolved into a storm of shifting black and white static, like an old television searching for a signal. There were no eyes, no mouth, no nose, just endless movement trapped inside the outline of a head. I stared at the screen, unable to look away. Something was moving inside the static. Frame by frame, the distortion changed shape until it formed another image hidden beneath the first. It was me. I recognized my jacket, my posture, even the scar on my left hand. I was standing outside apartment 304, facing my own front door. Then my arm slowly lifted. 3 deliberate knocks echoed through my headphones. Knock, knock, knock. Every camera continued recording. I stood perfectly still, refusing to answer the door. The hallway feed on my laptop showed exactly what I expected. Nothing. The corridor was completely empty. No movement. No visitor. No explanation. Then something impossible happened. The live preview from my body camera showed someone standing directly behind me. I spun around instantly. There was no one. I looked back at the screen. The figure was still there, only on the body camera. Tall, motionless, close enough that it should have been breathing against my neck. The DSLR displayed something completely different. Instead of the figure, it showed me standing alone beside the front door. The phone camera flickered violently before freezing on a single frame. The action camera recorded nothing but heavy digital static. Meanwhile, the hallway camera continued insisting the corridor was empty. Every device was recording the same moment. None of them agreed on what reality looked like. A cold whisper drifted through the apartment. It was too quiet to understand. Not coming from outside. Not coming from the hallway. It sounded as though someone was speaking directly into my ear. The words were distorted, stretching together like a damaged cassette tape playing underwater. I couldn't make out a single sentence. Only one phrase repeated over and over. Don't look. The whisper stopped as suddenly as it had begun. Every screen inside the apartment flashed black. The lights flickered once, twice, then everything shut down. Silence filled the room. For several seconds, I couldn't move. When the power returned, every recording had automatically ended. With trembling hands, I reviewed the files. The hallway footage was corrupted. The DSLR file wouldn't open. The body camera displayed nothing but broken pixels. The phone recording had vanished completely. Only one video survived. It came from the small action camera on the bookshelf. Frame by frame, the figure appeared again in different reflective surfaces. A polished handrail, an apartment window, the elevator's stainless steel doors. Always visible in reflections. Never visible directly. Neither of us spoke. Old evidence hadn't explained the mystery. It had proven every impossible recording was real. Mike finally broke the silence. "There was one tenant," he said quietly, refusing to meet my eyes. "He lived in apartment 304 about 11 years ago. What happened to him?" Mike swallowed hard. "He disappeared." My pulse quickened. "The police searched the building for 3 days. They never found a body. They never found him leaving. He simply vanished, without ever walking out of the building." Neither of us looked back at the monitor. We didn't have to. The clock on Mike's office wall read 8:17 p.m. Midnight was only a few hours away. I left Mike's office with one goal in mind. If whatever haunted apartment 304 could only be seen through certain cameras and reflections, then I wasn't going to rely on a single recording anymore. I wanted every possible angle covered. If something appeared, there would be no room left for doubt. By 10 o'clock that night, my apartment looked more like a surveillance lab than a home. I mounted my DSLR on a tripod facing the front door. My laptop remained connected to the hallway security camera, displaying the live feed in full screen. My phone recorded from the kitchen counter, angled toward the living room. I clipped a body camera to the center of my jacket and checked its battery twice. Finally, I placed a small action camera on the bookshelf facing the hallway inside my apartment. 5 cameras, 5 perspectives, 1 impossible mystery. At 11:59 p.m., I pressed record on every device. The apartment was silent except for the faint hum of electronics. My heartbeat sounded louder than the rain outside. Then the digital clock changed. 12 a.m. 3 slow knocks echoed through the apartment. Security footage showed him looking over his shoulder several times while running, but no one else appeared anywhere in the corridor. The company refused to deliver to the building again. As disturbing as that was, it wasn't the worst discovery. Mike opened another folder marked police reports. Apparently, officers had responded to multiple 911 calls from apartment 304 over the previous decade. Every caller reported hearing someone knocking outside their door after midnight. Every officer searched the building. Every hallway was empty. No signs of forced entry. No suspects. No explanation. The cases were eventually closed as false alarms. I wanted to believe every one of those people had imagined it. Then we discovered something impossible. Comparing dozens of recordings from different years, I noticed a strange pattern in the timestamps. Every single night that motion was detected, exactly 4 minutes of footage were missing. Not corrupted, not overwritten, missing. The recordings jumped from 12 a.m. to 12:04 a.m. without any error messages. It was as though those 4 minutes had never existed. Mike stared at the screen in disbelief. "I've never noticed that before." Neither had I. Security systems don't simply erase identical blocks of time across multiple generations of hardware. Unless something erased them deliberately. We searched every backup we could find until Mike remembered one forgotten external drive stored in the basement. It contained security footage recorded before the building upgraded its surveillance system. Most of the files were damaged. Only one survived intact. We loaded the recording. First, everything looked familiar. Empty hallway, silent building, midnight. Then the reflection appeared. Not on the floor this time. In the glass covering a fire extinguisher mounted on the wall. A tall figure stood perfectly still behind the camera. We immediately checked the hallway itself. Nothing. The reflection existed. The person didn't. Instead, the moment he saw the printed images spread across his desk, the color drained from his face. He didn't say a word for nearly a minute. Finally, he looked up at me with an expression that made my stomach tighten. "I was hoping you'd never see this," he whispered. Without another word, Mike unlocked a steel filing cabinet tucked beneath his desk and pulled out a cardboard box overflowing with old hard drives, DVDs, and security backups. Dust covered most of them, and several were labeled with dates going back almost 15 years. He admitted that every few years someone living on the third floor complained about the same strange midnight knocking. At first, the reports were dismissed as practical jokes, but eventually too many unrelated tenants described the exact same experience. 3 slow knocks, just after midnight, an empty hallway. We spent the next several hours reviewing archived footage from different cameras that had been installed over the years. The equipment changed. The image quality improved. The hallway was renovated twice. Tenants came and went. One detail never changed. Every camera detected motion after midnight. Every recording appeared empty. Every investigation ended without an explanation. The files were filled with handwritten maintenance notes from previous managers. Several tenants had abruptly broken their leases despite having months remaining on their contracts. One elderly couple moved out overnight without collecting most of their furniture. A graduate student abandoned nearly everything in his apartment except a suitcase and never returned for the rest of his belongings. The strangest report involved a delivery driver. Mike found an incident report from 6 years earlier. A courier delivering a package to apartment 304 had reached the 3rd floor, stopped halfway down the hallway, dropped every package he was carrying, and sprinted back to the elevator in complete panic. Halfway through the clip, the timestamp suddenly changed. Without skipping a frame, it flashed to 11:59 and 58 seconds p.m., then 12 o'clock and 21 seconds a.m., then back to 12 o'clock and 10 seconds a.m. The hallway never changed. Only time did. I checked the system logs expecting to find corrupted metadata. Everything was normal. The camera insisted the recording had never experienced an error. Night after night, the impossible details multiplied. The reflection grew darker. The shadow stretched farther across the floor. The missing pixels appeared more frequently. The timestamps became increasingly impossible. And every single recording placed the invisible figure a little closer to my apartment. Not by much. A foot, maybe 2. Just enough to make comparisons terrifyingly obvious. I printed screenshots from each night's recording and spread them across my dining table. When I aligned them side by side, the pattern became impossible to ignore. The figure wasn't wandering. It wasn't random. It was walking, one slow step every night, always toward apartment 304, toward my door. Reality continued insisting the hallway was empty. My own eyes confirmed it every single time. But the recordings refused to agree. Whatever the camera was seeing, it was getting closer, and if the pattern continued, it would reach my apartment within days. I barely slept after that realization. Every evening I found myself watching the clock, waiting for midnight with growing dread. If the camera could witness something invisible to human eyes, then perhaps the only way to understand it was to stop relying on recordings alone. The next night, I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of sleeping, I would stay awake until midnight and record every second myself. The next morning, I carried every screenshot, every recording, and every note I'd made over the past week straight to Mike's office. I expected him to laugh, blame faulty equipment, or suggest replacing the camera altogether. The camera showed nothing except the familiar row of apartment doors and the soft yellow lights stretching toward the elevator. I stood quietly beside the door, listening. Nothing. The silence returned so suddenly that I wondered if I'd imagined the entire thing. Carefully, I leaned toward the peephole. The hallway looked exactly as it did on my phone. Empty. No footsteps. No shadows. No person walking away. Only stillness. I unlocked the door just enough to pull it open a few inches. Cold air drifted inside. The hallway remained deserted. I stepped outside. Every apartment door was closed. The elevator display hadn't moved. The stairwell door was shut. There wasn't a single place someone could have hidden in the few seconds between the knocking and me opening the door. I checked the camera recording the next morning. The motion sensor had activated at 12 o'clock and 3 seconds a.m. Again, the hallway appeared empty, but the reflection had changed. The dark outline was no longer standing halfway down the corridor. It had moved another few feet closer. Now it stood directly across from apartment 304. The shape looked slightly clearer than before. The shoulders were wider, the head more defined. Even the outline of long fingers seemed visible in the polished floor. I replayed the footage repeatedly, searching for any explanation. Instead of finding answers, I noticed something even stranger. For a fraction of a second, several pixels near the reflection simply disappeared. Not glitched, not blurred, gone. Tiny square-shaped holes flickered across the video before instantly returning. It was as though the camera itself couldn't decide what belonged in that part of the image. The following night, the knocking returned. Exactly 3 knocks. Exactly midnight. Again, nobody was outside. Again, the hallway camera insisted something had triggered the motion sensor. This time, the timestamp caught my attention. The recording began at 12 o'clock and 7 seconds a.m. Edge detection traced shoulders where empty air should have been. Every tool I used made the invisible figure easier to see. None of them explained why it existed. That night, another motion alert arrived. Same hallway, same time, same empty recording, except the reflection had changed. It wasn't standing near apartment 304 anymore. It had moved several feet closer to my own apartment door. Not much, just enough that I immediately noticed. Night after night, the alerts continued. Always after midnight, always showing an empty hallway, always revealing that impossible reflection. And with every new recording, the figure became slightly darker, slightly sharper, slightly closer. Technology was supposed to answer questions. Instead, every recording created a bigger mystery than the one before. I couldn't explain what I was seeing, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Deleting those recordings would be a mistake. Whatever the camera was capturing, it was trying to show me something. So instead of erasing the files and moving on with my life, I created a separate folder, archived every clip, and decided to keep recording until I finally discovered what was waiting in that hallway after midnight. The knocking started on the 7th night. It wasn't loud. It wasn't violent. It was calm, deliberate, and strangely patient. Knock. A few seconds passed. Knock. Another pause. Knock. Exactly 3 knocks. Nothing more. I glanced at the clock on my nightstand. 12 a.m. For a moment, I didn't move. I convinced myself the sound had come from another apartment or maybe from old pipes expanding inside the walls. The building was more than 30 years old, and strange noises weren't unusual. Then the knocks came again. 3 slow taps, always evenly spaced, always from the direction of my front door. I grabbed my phone and opened the live security feed before doing anything else. The hallway was completely empty. I assumed the system had been triggered by an insect flying too close to the lens or a sudden change in lighting. False alarms happened occasionally, especially with sensitive motion settings. I dismissed the notification, rolled over, and went back to sleep. The following morning, curiosity got the better of me. I opened the recorded clip. 32 seconds long. Nothing happened. An empty hallway sat perfectly still beneath the dim ceiling lights. No movement, no sound, no explanation for why the camera had started recording. I almost deleted the file. Almost. Instead, I replayed it one last time, this time slowing the footage to a quarter of its normal speed. That's when I noticed something. Near apartment 304, the polished wooden floor reflected what looked like the outline of a person. I frowned. There was no person standing there. The hallway itself was completely empty, yet the reflection remained. It was faint, barely visible, but unmistakably human in shape. Broad shoulders, long arms hanging motionless at its sides. A tall silhouette stretching across the floor exactly where someone should have been standing. Except, there was no body casting it. I leaned closer to the screen, convinced it had to be a trick of the lighting. Frame by frame, the reflection stayed perfectly aligned with the hallway lights, refusing to disappear no matter how closely I examined it. The floor reflected someone. Reality didn't. A chill crept across my shoulders. I exported the footage into professional editing software and began analyzing every individual frame. Over the years, I'd restored damaged surveillance recordings for police investigations, insurance claims, and criminal cases. Compression artifacts, rolling shutter distortions, digital noise. I knew every flaw modern cameras could produce. This wasn't one of them. Brightness adjustments revealed the outline becoming slightly clearer. Contrast enhancement exposed the faint curve of what looked like a head. Knock, knock, knock. My blood turned to ice. I checked the metadata again, convinced the file had somehow become corrupted during processing. It hadn't. The timestamp wasn't wrong. I had been reading it incorrectly all along. The recording wasn't showing what had already happened. It was showing what would happen the following night. Every clip I'd been studying, every impossible reflection, every step the invisible figure had taken toward my apartment had been counting down to a future that hadn't happened yet. The camera hadn't captured a ghost. It had captured tomorrow. I looked at the clock. Less than 24 hours remained before the recording became reality. For the first time since this nightmare began, one question terrified me more than anything I had already seen. If the future had already been recorded, could it still be changed? I made my decision before the fear could change my mind. Tomorrow night, no matter what I heard, I would never answer those 3 knocks. The next morning, I smashed every camera I owned, wiped every hard drive, and deleted every backup before leaving Seattle forever. I convinced myself distance had broken whatever nightmare had followed me. Months passed without a single incident. Then, one rainy evening, my phone vibrated. Location: apartment 304. I opened the attached recording. There I was, standing silently outside my new front door, thousands of miles away. My hands slowly rose. 3 familiar knocks echoed through my house. I never checked the peephole, and if your security camera ever records motion in an empty hallway, don't replay the footage after midnight.